Last month, I put up a video on Fander Films about the Zam Zam well. Now, I've been zeroing in on Mecca. Of course, we've been going in onto the Quran and doing a number of different things. But I was looking at Mecca and I was looking at the Zam Zam well, because whenever we say that Mecca is isolated and that it could not have accommodated any large population or any historical characters or figures or certainly any empires or civilizations, the comeback is look at Mecca today and look and see it. 2 million people live there. Another 2 to 3 million people come during the Hajj, so it does accommodate large population. It does have a civilization. It has plenty of water, and that has always been the problem. The water. It's the water. It's the water. And I remember back in 2019, I got up on the ladder at Speaker's Corner with Hatun Tosh and even looked at the problem with the fact that it's in the middle of a desert where there's no water. And when there's no water, there is no vegetation, no people, no towns, no cities, no civilization, no history. And that's why you need to look and see where it's located. It's just located in the wrong place. No one lived there. It was too desertic. It was much too inhospitable a climate, including Yathrib, which is, at least it's up on the plateau. It does have water. It's an oasis, or Taif, which is also up in the plateau, up in the mountainous area. Mecca's not up there. It's down below. And that's why when I put that video up last month, there was a lot of great comments. Many of you supported, but there were quite a few of you who kept on sending me this video by Dr. Shabir Ali. Good friend of mine. I've known him for many years. I've debated him 6 times. The last time we debated was on the Quran, and we debated on the 6 manuscripts, the 6 earliest manuscripts, which he was not able to answer. Well, he tried to with the miracle of the number 19. And this is a new question, bringing up another miracle. Back then it was the number 19. Now it's the miracle of the Zam Zam water. The miracle of this water. And this video was not very long. It was only a few minutes long, maybe 5 or 6 minutes long. And his daughter is the one who was asking him questions. And she was asking questions that Muslims, probably many like you, were forwarding to Dr. Ali. And one of them was, where does this water come from? Here there are 2 million people that are living in Mecca. They are all dependent. They're not really all dependent on the Zam Zam water, but those who go to the Hajj, those who go to the Kaaba, to the Masjid al-Haram, that central place where the Kaaba sits, would have to be dependent on this water. So that would accommodate all 2 million of them. Another 2 to 3 million come during the Hajj. That's anywhere upwards of 4 to 5 million people would want to drink the water, the Zam Zam well. Here's some pictures of different bottling factories that ship it out all over the world. The Zam Zam water is shipped everywhere. You could go to many of your Muslim bookstores in any country that you live in or any city there where you are, and just look for the Zam Zam water, and there it is. It's on a shelf. Zam Zam water. You can buy it in a liter or 2 liters or even larger, and it's from this Zam Zam well. We talked about this in the video. So Dr. Shabir Ali was trying to answer it. Here's what he said.
Welcome back. Now we answer questions we've received from you, our viewers. If you have a question, visit our website, QuranSpeaks.com. Dr. Shabir, the question is, some studies show that Zam Zam water contains harmful chemicals for the human body. It is said that it cures illness. Is this true? Could Zam Zam water really have these holy properties? What is the source of the water, and why hasn't it dried up? Lots of questions about Zam Zam.
Exactly. Now, you did some research on the source of the water, and you found that it's a mountainous region around Mecca. And so the rainwater continues to replenish the Zam Zam water. Otherwise, it's a mystery to how this water is so well supplied, because if you think of the number of pilgrims that go there, I mean, pre-pandemic, you would have 2 million, maybe 3 million pilgrims every year just in the Hajj season. They're all drinking from the water there while they're in Mecca, and some water is transported to Medina as well. They're drinking even while they're in Medina for several days. And apart from the Hajj season itself, for several months, people are performing Umrah, visiting there and performing sacred rites, a lesser pilgrimage. and from all over the world, they're drinking the water, and they also take some of the water back with them for their family and friends. So it's to many Muslims, this is a miracle that this continues to be provided like this.
So you can see, he was just claiming it comes from mountainous water. It's rainwater that filters off the mountain, and that's why it then filters right down into the Zam Zam well. No, it doesn't. The rainwater, if anybody knows anything about the wadis are what the name means, these valleys that are all coming down from the mountain. The wadis are there to where the run of the water runs off. In fact, it runs so quickly and they come so infrequently that they run right off and down the wadis and into the sea. Very little of it goes actually into the Zam Zam well. These aquifers that Muslims keep talking about, there are very few aquifers that actually support. In fact, I'm going to put up this graph right here. The source of the environment and water and agriculture from Saudi Arabia. Take a look at this. Let me put it up there and show you. This is from 2020, so this is 3 years ago. The percentage of desalinated water of total consumption by the major cities that there are in Saudi Arabia. 63% of all the water in Saudi Arabia is dependent on desalinated water. In other words, water that's taken from the Red Sea or taken from the different oceans surrounding Arabia, and they are then desalinated and then made into drinking water that people can drink. Look at the cities, and you will notice Riyadh doesn't need that much. Maybe 16% of its water is desalinated. The city, that's the region. The Riyadh city needs about 64. So almost over half of its water has to come from these desalinated plants. As-Sirah needs 71%. Medina needs 95. 95% of its water is desalinated. It is not from the groundwater. And Mecca is right at the very top. 98% of its water is desalinated. In other words, it would not survive without desalinated water, without this new technology coming from Bechtel and other European and American corporations and engineering firms that have actually created the technology so that the people in Saudi Arabia can survive. That's what's interesting about this claim that he is making, that it all just comes from this rainwater. To accommodate, though he admits 3 to 5 million pilgrims that come during the Hajj, and it's a miracle, is the way he says it. It was a miracle from the very beginning. Notice what he said, where it comes from and how this was all about. Let's just look and see what he says is the reason why this enormous amount of water can be provided.
To many Muslims, this is a miracle that this continues to be provided like this. But we attribute that to the story that goes with the founding of the Zam Zam. It is mentioned in Islamic sources that when Abraham left his child and the child's mother in the desert region here, the angel came and struck the ground, and the spring began, and so we see this as having a miraculous origin, and the water is being provided by God, whether you see it by rainwater or whatever means, but it is God's provision, and it is there.
Well, it's obviously from what Dr. Shabirati is saying that it is from Allah himself. Allah was the one that created it right at the very beginning with Hagar, when Abraham threw her out into the desert. That's interesting because he does admit that Abraham threw her out in the desert, and then Hagar found this water. So where was Abraham while he was throwing her out? Where was Abraham? If that is the well, that means that is the well where Hagar was when she was out in the desert, thrown out by Abraham. So Abraham couldn't have been anywhere near that. And I always thought Abraham was the one that built the Kaaba. The Kaaba is only 60 feet away from the Zam Zam well. Do you see the disconnect there? I don't think Shabir Ali's thought this through. How can you throw her out into the desert? She's looking for water. She goes back and forth between two mountains called Marwa and Safa. They're only rocks today. They're only about 100 feet away from the Kaaba. And there's the Zam Zam well in between these two rocks. If Hagar was out in the desert all by herself with no one around, then what's the Kaaba doing right next door? Just a few feet away. No one's thought this through. Especially if the Kaaba was built there by Adam and Eve. Did it just sit by itself with no structures around it? Was no one living in Mecca? Where there were no people there? Where was Abraham all this time? Where were all the other people that were with Abraham? Obviously, there's a disconnect there. But here he says that was a miracle at that time. That's the miracle of today, is what he's implying. That's why it is able to provide for the whole world. He's not thinking through the enormous amount of numbers. You're talking about millions upon millions of liters of water just to accommodate not just the people that are there, but the millions that want it in all their shops that they wanted to drink. And then came the question about, is it harmful? Is there any harm, or is it holy? Is it holy? So let's go to this and see how he answers that.
Now, is it harmful? There was an article in a British newspaper more than a decade ago citing some harms from some of the water, but the Saudi authorities denied it. And later on, it was thought that maybe the harm came not from the source, the Zam Zam well itself, but maybe through some of the packaged water which was being sold in some London bookshops, where they sold also some bottled water labeled with the Zam Zam label. But a lot of pilgrims have continued to drink the water directly from the source there in Mecca, and they come back hale and healthy without any problems to report from drinking the water itself. Does the water have curative properties? It is mentioned in hadith attributed to our Prophet, peace be upon him, that when one drinks the water of Zam Zam, whatever one drinks it for, it will be effective for that. And so when Muslims drink, we are taught to recite a prayer which goes like this. Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'a wa rizqan wasi'a wa shifa'an min kulli da'. Oh Allah, I ask you for a vast knowledge, for beneficial knowledge, for ample provision, and for a cure from every illness. So based on this dua and the whole promise that whatever you drink it for, it'll be effective for, Muslims drink it with the hope that through this water, God will cure them. But of course, every cure comes from God himself. It's not inherent in the water itself.
Can you explain, Dr. Shabir, what you mean by the cure being not in the water itself?
Well, all cure is in the hands of God. Even if you take medicine, we don't say the cure is in the medicine, because somebody can take the medicine and not be cured. Somebody may not be taking the medicine, but can be cured anyway. So the promise that when one drinks the Zam Zam water, it will be effective for whatever they are using it for, does not mean that the Zam Zam water by itself is a cure-all for everything. But it means that when a Muslim is there, performing the acts of the Hajj and is devoted to God and has that faith in God, that God will cure them, whether through this water or some other means, and then makes the kind of prayer that we just described, asking God for the cure, then it is God that will cure the person. It's not the water itself. So one should not get the idea, if we just run away with this water, then we can cure all diseases. No, it is the faith of the person and the connection with God that will bring that ultimate cure.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you for your time, Dr.
You're welcome.
And you can see what he answered very quickly. No, it's not harmful at all. He's not quite saying it's holy, although he does say it has this miracle from Allah. And the only harm that comes from it is some packaging that went wrong. And he used the example of one case in London where some other firms that were not part of the Zam Zam Corporation tried to create their own Zam Zam water, and they had impurities, and that made people sick there in London. But does it cure? He says, yes, it can, depending on how you pray, depending on how much faith you have, that it will cure. And it's fascinating that he would say this without looking at history. Today, I'm sure it doesn't harm you. Today, it's been purified. Today, it's been filtered. Today, it's even had perfumes put into it, made it sweeter so it tastes better. That's all done by these huge plants. That's all done by this Western technology. Thank God for Western technology. He didn't want to acknowledge that. Not from Allah, that's from Western technology. But this idea that it is not harmful, he should look at some history. Well, here's what's great about YouTube. Because I put this up there last month, I've been getting lots of responses from quite a few of you. And some of you have been sending me back these articles that are from the 1800s and from the early 1900s. Here's one from 1881. The Standard writes about this cholera outbreak in Mecca. there on November the 18th of 1881, it said that there was this bad cholera epidemic there in Mecca. 300 were killed. They all died of cholera. They had to be quarantined because of the water coming out of the Zam Zam well. It was so stagnant that it was actually affecting the people that were drinking it. And they talked about the Zam Zam well in this article and called the murmuring water. And he mentions that it is from Hagar, like Shabir Ali. And there was a stream that came down from the hill that created it. But what it says is that this is supposed to be a holy spot, according to what Muslims tell them. But somehow God forgot about it and created all this overcrowding there in Mecca. And as the overcrowding, all the sewage was getting into the Zam Zam well, which was causing the cholera and causing the epidemic. In 1881, then the Turkish officials, it said, came and saw the Zam Zam well was full of sewage. It was all this wastewater with all this stuff floating on it. And so they saw that all these pilgrims were bottling it, which is what they do today as well. Well, they were doing it back in the 1800s, 1880. And so the Turkish officials had to put up guards outside of Mecca and down at Jeddah, because that's where they all got on the boat to go home. And they had to confiscate any bottles from this impure, absolutely impure, cholera-causing water that was festering with human excrement. And they say, therefore, they had to ban all bottles as contraband, according to what the article says here. And it was all caused by cholera morbus. And it was this and several epidemics in the same year of 1881. And the cure, they said? Well, the cure, according to what the Saudi Arabian officials said at that time, was to drink mint lime juice or coffee. And if that didn't work, if vomiting started to occur, you just let them die, is what they said. You just left them to die. So certainly in 1881, according to this article from the Standard, it was not very pure water. In fact, it caused all the problems. Here's one from 1901, the Chicago Tribune. It talks about the Zam Zam water, and it mentions it as the water of death. This is in 1901. This is from April the 14th. Chicago Tribune talks about the Zam Zam well, referred to as the water of death, due to the sewage of Mecca, which filters into it, because there was no way to keep the sewage out. And as a result of that, pilgrims were carrying disease germs in bottles, and they were taking it home with them. So they were trying to stop them from taking this cholera with them as they went back to their own countries. So that's in 1901. Here's 1902, the very next year. Because of the Zam Zam water and because of all this sewage that was seeping into it, it was causing so much cholera there that 110 people had already died before they shut down the well. This was in this is March 7th of 1902. Let's go then to, well, here was another one in 1912. So 10 years later, on December 27th, the Chicago Tribune. Oh, that last one was Birmingham Evening Dispatch that talked about it. 110 die. Now we're in 1912, so we're well into the 20th century. We're not talking about the 9th, 10th, 11th century. We're talking about the 20th century. The Zam Zam water, according to Chicago Tribune, on December the 27th of 1912, because of the cholera caused by the Zam Zam water, because of this terrible water that was festering with all this human refuse, 1,714 people died on the Hajj there that year, and that causing an alarming epidemic. So that was in 1912. Now we go 2 years later to 1914, and this was January 7th, and the Calumet News. The cholera epidemic caused by the water coming from the Zam Zam well caused such an epidemic that it was spreading. They had to quarantine all of the people leaving. So here's another one in 1914. In 1915, the very next year, in February 7th, so we're talking almost exactly a year later, according to the Star Press, there was so much cholera being caused by the water that they had to put a quarantine from 12 to 24 hours at a time, stopping anybody leaving that had any of this water. And what was interesting, I'm going to just read you this there. It was saying, there seems to be an eternal and permanent abiding place of cholera parasites in this city. More so than any other city, it is as bad as any other major city in the world that had cholera epidemic. Mecca was the top of the list, and certainly was the top of the list for Saudi Arabia, proving that the Zam Zam well was not a healing well. It was not at all even clean. It was causing these deaths. That was in 1915. In 1920s, we're well into the 20th century now, folks. 1920, the Brooklyn Citizen talks about another quarantine that had to be brought because of this cholera epidemic. And that Meccans had such a bad reputation because of the fact that they stole from people and they were hoarding things, the people that came. And then we get to 1930. Now, 1930, this is interesting. Look at the date. Because in 1926, as I said in the last episode, in 1926, it would cause such a problem that finally the Saudi authorities started to get water from desalination. This is the beginning of the desalination plan in 1926 because they realized that they couldn't keep up all these epidemics. This was causing epidemic after epidemic. The bubonic plague, cholera, smallpox, but especially cholera, which is caused by the fetid water. This was causing such a problem that in 1926 they finally had to desalinate their water using the smart type of technology that was available at that time from the West. It was so problem that Mecca had always been so notorious as a pilgrimage. They call it the pilgrimage epidemics. These epidemics always come during pilgrimage because they all want Zam Zam water. Finally, in 1930 was the first year after using this desalinated water that was coming from Jeddah. There was the first year that there was no cholera or bubonic plague case. That was the first year. Now they said in this, according to this article in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, that the reason why they were finally able to stop these epidemics, these recurring epidemics, year after year after year, I've just given you year after year after year, these recurring epidemics, the reason they were able to stop it, it was because they finally built hospitals, dispensary, and started using proper Western medicine. Thank God for the West, and thank God for our medicine, because we were able to then come and eradicate now. So Shabirati says that this is all because of Allah. This miracle that Allah provided at the very beginning with Hagar in the 1900 BC, that miracle still exists today, and therefore it is not harmful whatsoever because Allah will protect you. The only harmful bits are those that are packaged wrong, like in the case in London, but not the Zam Zam well. It is pure. Folks, it may be pure today, but it has not been pure through history. And these are 1800, 1902, 1914, 1915, 1920, 1930. Finally, by 1930, the Saudi Arabians got their act together and finally started using Western technology to protect it so it could be pure, so that it is pure today. Thank God for companies like Bechtel and others. And thank God it is the West that has saved the Zam Zam well, not Allah, I'm afraid. Okay. I just thought we needed to get the record corrected, and we need to help Shabbat Ali with this. He will say, and he did say, that, it won't cure you necessarily. You still need to go to the doctor, you still need to go, but it is Allah who cures you. It is Allah that actually guides the hand of the doctor. It is Allah that gives the medicine to you that you're. But to say that this water somehow will cure you, I think that's going beyond the pale. I think we need to look at the historical record, correct it, and help our friends like Shabirati realize that be careful what you say. It's going to come back to bite you. If you really want a real cure, why don't you get the living water? Why don't you get the eternal water? And who do we know as the living water? Well, that's Jesus himself. He calls himself the living water. And that water is forever. It is eternal. And it will give you life, not just here, but life forever, eternally. God bless you. This is Jay. Over and out.